Hello and welcome to Cleveland Classic Cinema. Tonight's film is 1959's The Killer Shrews, directed by Ray Kellogg.
What is that?
It's a Sorex cericidae.
Looks like a small rat.
Shrews as small as rats, perfect for scientific experiments, until they began to grow and grow into things.
They must eat 3 times their own weight in food every 24 hours or starve.
There are 200 or 300 giant shrews out there. Monsters weighing between 50 and 100 pounds.
That's as big as a full-grown wolf.
Blood-curdling, horrifyingly poisonous monsters.
It was the livestock. The shrews got into the barn.
The wildest of flesh eaters, threatening all mankind. Your flesh will crawl with fear at their nearness.
The shrews were out there. I couldn't take a chance.
Back in the 70s, Cleveland had 3 movie show hosts. On Channel 8 was Big Chuck and Little John. On Channel 61 was The Ghoul, who was an extension of Ernie Anderson's Ghoulardi character and still pops up now and then. And Channel 43 had the late Marty Sullivan superhost. A lot of the movies we show here on Cleveland Classic Cinema are ones they broadcast. The host may be different, but one thing that never seems to change is the quality of public domain movies available. I myself don't have a problem with this. For the most part, being able to see these movies again is really great. It is until I watch them anyway. See, the thing of it is that a lot of stuff that I found terrifying when I was young doesn't even faze me now. I remember when I was younger, I saw a movie called Kronos. It was about this huge robot that was sent to Earth from some unknown planet to steal all of our energy. It was a pretty simplistic design. At first, it's just this big block that appears on a beach in Mexico. Then it sprouts these weird-looking antennae and grows into this gigantic Lego thing with 4 piston-like legs and goes all over the place, sucking up energy and stomping on people. It scared the hell out of me when I was a kid, but I loved it at the same time because, like most kids into monsters, I liked to draw them, but I couldn't draw very well. My brother John, now that guy can draw. You wouldn't believe how talented he is. And he could knock out a drawing of something like the creature from the Black Lagoon with his eyes closed, but he was more into drawing women, something that, at that age, I couldn't understand at all. I mean, there were girls everywhere, but, you know, how often do you see a mummy shambling down the street? Anyway, I was always trying to draw my favorite monsters, and they all ended up disproportionate and looking nothing like they were supposed to. But Kronos, on the other hand, I mean, that was a snap, you know? 2 big blocks with antenna, 4 cylinders coming out of the bottom. For a kid who couldn't draw something recognizable with a gun to his head, this thing was a godsend. I draw it stomping down the countryside and sucking electricity out of power lines and smashing people and whatnot. And the cool thing was that everyone who saw the movie could recognize it. Unfortunately, there were only so many ways to draw Kronos. I mean, he looked pretty much the same from any angle, so I was limited in what I could draw him doing since I had no idea how to draw in perspective. And to tell you the truth, no matter how scared I was of it, it got pretty dull after a while. As a matter of fact, the best thing about owning it on DVD now is the fact that I can see what the headline of the newspaper really says. The movie was shot in widescreen, but at the time it was broadcast, there was no such thing as letterboxing, which, in my opinion, is the greatest thing that ever happened to mankind. Before I go on, let me say a few words about letterboxing. Now, this is going to be short, so don't reach for the remote just yet. The aspect ratio of a normal television is 4:3. That is 4 wide, 3 high. And this was based on the aspect ratio movies were shot in. Even though studios have been experimenting with different formats ever since the inception of film, they pretty much stuck with an aspect ratio of 4:3 due to cost considerations. When television began stealing the movie's audience at an alarming rate, the movie studios figured they'd better come up with something that would get people out of the house and back into the theaters, something they couldn't get at home. They came up with things like 3D, which didn't last long because the audience kept getting headaches from having things shoved in their faces. If you see a 3D movie projected flat, it seems kind of strange because you keep seeing things like this. The reason audiences got headaches is because when something was thrust at the screen, they went cross-eyed as it came towards them. That and the bother of wearing the cardboard glasses pretty much killed 3D quickly. One of the other things they came up with, and something that has lasted to this day, was widescreen. The first widescreen process to really make an impact on the movie-going audience was Cinerama. Cinerama had its roots in a technique invented for aerial gunnery training during World War II by a man named Fred Waller. 4 trainees would sit in a large room in front of a huge spherical screen on which 5 synchronized projectors threw movies of enemy planes that dove on the novice gunners every which way. In a realistic 3-dimensional atmosphere, each gunner fired an electronic machine gun at his adversaries. The gun recorded the hits instead of firing bullets. The process was developed to simulate the angle of view human eyes have, including peripheral vision. Rather than bore you with a detailed description of how Cinerama works, I'll just leave it to this. 3 synchronized 35mm projectors, one pointing straight ahead and the other 2 pointing to the right and left, threw the images recorded by a special camera onto 3 screens set side by side in a curve that measured 25 feet high by 51 feet long. This pretty much filled the angle of view of a normal person and gave the viewer a sensation of being surrounded by the image. It also included really magnificent stereo sound, another first in theaters. I saw How the West Was Won at, as I recall, the Hippodrome Theater in downtown Cleveland when I was a kid, and it was a pretty amazing experience. There's a ton more info about Cinerama available, and if you're interested in finding out about it, get on the computer and hire yourself over to the widescreenmuseum.com. That site has info about every single widescreen process ever invented, and it's fascinating reading if you're interested. Anyway, getting back to letterboxing, I cannot agree with people who don't like it. I know the I want my entire screen filled argument, but that doesn't hold water at all, at least not for me. I remember seeing Return of the Jedi on videotape when it first came out and being rather dismayed at how unexciting it was. And I couldn't figure out why I felt that way until I realized that the reason I found it so unexciting was the fact that half of the action was missing. I was only seeing the middle of the frame instead of all of it. There's a process used on full-screen format movies called pan and scan, wherein the full screen is scanned from left to right in order to show the pertinent info that would otherwise be seen in a widescreen presentation. And to put it bluntly, it sucks. It completely destroys the flow of the film and is, I feel at least, intrusive and an insult to the vision of the filmmaker. If a movie is shot in widescreen, it should be seen that way, especially if the movie features a newspaper headline like this one in Chronos. Getting back to the original subject, the things that scared me when I was a kid just don't do it anymore. Tonight's movie, The Killer Shrews, is a perfect example of this. Way back in the 60s, when my knowledge of movies and how they were made wasn't quite as sophisticated as it is now, the thought of giant shrews running around biting and killing people was pretty scary. At least it was until I went to the Natural History Museum and saw how big a shrew really is. I mean, the damn things are like this big. The next time the movie was on, I looked at it a little closer, and the thought occurred to me that if there were such a thing as giant man-eating shrews, they wouldn't wag their tails when they attacked humans. When I looked at them even closer, I realized that they were actually dogs with wigs and plastic teeth, and since I love dogs, I felt bad when they got shot. Thus began my descent into adulthood, at least as far as horror movies went. Regular viewers will remember our showing the Giant Gila Monster a number of shows ago. That movie and the one you're about to see were both directed by Ray Kellogg. They both suck pretty much, but the thing this movie has over the Giant Gila Monster is that there aren't any crippled little sisters to yank at your heartstrings, no comic relief drunk drivers, and thank God, no mushroom song. If I had to listen to that damn thing one more time, I would have quit the show. The Lord said, "Gag, children, gag." James Best was born on July 26, 1926 in Powderly, Kentucky. His first role was an uncredited walk-on in 1950's One-Way Street, and he appeared in 170 movie and TV shows in his long career, including 2 appearances as Jim Lindsay, the guitar player on The Andy Griffith Show. Because of his down-home accent, he was relegated mostly to roles in westerns where he played bad guys, bumpkins, or cowards. He had a better choice of roles once he got into TV and eventually found fame as Sheriff Roscoe P. Coltrane in the series The Dukes of Hazzard, the less said about which the better. An interesting bit of trivia. He's the cousin of Don and Phil Everly, a.k.a. the Everly Brothers. Ingrid Gude was born in 1937 in Sandviken, Sweden, appeared in 10 movie and TV shows, and was second runner-up in the 1957 Miss Universe pageant. That's it. Ken Curtis was born on July 2nd, 1916 in Lamar, Colorado. He began his show business career as a singer in the Sons of the Pioneers and also sang for Tommy Dorsey before breaking into movies as a singing cowboy, introducing the Western standard Tumblin' Tumbleweeds. When the singing cowboy genre died out, he went on to star in movies for his father-in-law, director John Ford, and appeared in many TV shows, most notably as Festus Hagen on Gunsmoke. He based the character on a man he met while growing up in Los Animas, Colorado, where his father was the sheriff. They lived above the jail, and a frequent visitor was a local known as Cedar Jack. Cedar Jack was a woodsman who lived out in the Cedar Hills and made a living cutting cedar fence posts for local farmers and ranchers. He was a heavy drinker and usually ended up in the jail, where Ken got a lot of opportunities to observe him. Ken Curtis died in his sleep of natural causes on April 29, 1991 in Fresno, California. There's not much I can say about the killer Shrews. It is what it is. The story is as follows. Captain Thorne Sherman and his first mate, Rook Griswold, aren't those great names? Are delivering supplies to a semi-deserted island where a pair of scientists are working on, as usual, a boon to mankind that goes horrendously wrong. They're trying to ensure that there's enough food to feed everyone in the world, so naturally they experiment on shrews. As everyone knows, buffalo shrews are pretty damn tasty, so this makes perfect sense. Unfortunately, the drunken idiot assistant Jerry has left the cage open and the shrews escape and breed like crazy. So now the entire island, except for the walled compound where the lab resides, is overrun with coon dogs in wigs and dentures. Since the shrews are determined to survive, they eat whatever is left on the island. They eat poison left out for them, but somehow manage to absorb it into their systems, so now they're poisonous as well as hungry. It's up to the two-fisted Captain Sherman to get the survivors off the island and leave the shrews to eventually starve to death. He has the usual problems dealing with the cowardly assistant, and the shrews somehow managing to chew through the walls with plastic fangs, and, well, I wouldn't want to spoil it for you. So right now, pet your dog, then sit back, relax, and enjoy The Killer Shrews right here on Cleveland Classic Cinema.